Beverly Copeland. This is the Beverly Copeland Report. This is This is Thursday, December, what is it? The 31st, 2013. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the person. I have to leave this country because my mom died in April of last year. And it's been downhill ever since. I've developed a heart condition that's quite troubling. I have to take medication 3 times a day. The coronary condition, I'm told, is stress-related. My heart is getting worse. I fear a massive heart attack. And I fear that if I go to a hospital, around a hospital, I believe my mother was murdered when she went to the hospital, and I believe if I go to a hospital, I'll be murdered too. Because some smart aleckly, let me be frank, Jewish doctor is going to say something to me about Wall Street or Help Wall Street, and I'm going to go off, and they're going to call me an anti-Semite and pull the plug. So I have to get out of this country. If I have value to society, I'll be in Liverpool, England by the end of March. Because I feel it coming. It's just too stressful, this criminal trespass of this house. I went this week to get my passport. I go and the clerk has me fill out the form of the express mail thing from a post office, not the post office where I was, from another post office to the government passport office. I said, shouldn't you be filling this out? So she said, you fill it out. So I did what I said, you know what? I'm not going to get that extra service. So I kept it because I didn't want to hand it in. Because I just, it might have been legit, but so many things happened, I felt uncomfortable. This house continues to be criminally trespassed. The attitude to the police, they're not doing anything. I know that. For example, the Internal Revenue Service told me, I didn't tell them. The Internal Revenue Service told me that someone had fraudulently filed a tax return in my name for tax year 2011. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? And the Internal Revenue Service also told me that they caught the person, they could identify it wasn't me. They caught the person, they wouldn't give me any other information, had personal detailed information about me. And where is that information? It's locked in a file cabinet or locked in the basement of this house. Which means that someone has and continues to criminally trespass this house. The IRS said they had information about my last job. My last job was for 9.5 years as a senior government official, as a commissioner, assistant commissioner for the city of New York. That's very stressful, I had avoided getting debit cards or credit cards, but inasmuch as I'm leaving this country, I got one of these new, my bank office is a debit card, credit card, MasterCard. But it's the credit card, MasterCard, is not tied to a line of credit, it's tied to your checking account. So it's like a prepaid credit card, a debit card that you can use to charge things. I got it, I had to get it because I'm going to be leaving the country. I had relied on personal checks. So I feel uncomfortable when things like that happen to me. It might have been legit, and it was such a fiasco getting the passport, but I wanted an expedited passport. This is why I have to get out the country. So everything is a stress. Stress. But let me say this too. I'll give you an example why I say I'm a proud, unabashed supporter of Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism. I had the good fortune to, despite pressure to pigeonhole me, to study the things I wanted to in life. I had a first-class education. So I have always interested in science. When I graduated from elementary school, I received the award for distinction in science, right? Because my standardized test scores in the science were outstanding. I went to the Bronx High School of Science, at the time the top high school in the world for math and science. I then went to Columbia undergraduate, the Women's College, Barnard. I had completed two majors, philosophy and political science. I then got 2 graduate degrees in business, one from Columbia University and a second one from Pace University. Again, I'm a proud and a vast supporter of Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism. I dropped out of a PhD in economics from the Grad Center program in economics. It was a top program. But I'm a proud and a vast supporter of Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism. The human crisis is a crisis of ideas, right? I say that as a philosophy major, right? Capitalism is a theory. It is a blueprint. It is not, capitalism is not, it is just a theory. It's a blueprint, a plan for action, right? The problems with capitalism reflect human failing more than they reflect necessarily the problems with theory. Okay. Now, keeping it real, communism, socialism, they too are roadmaps, blueprints for human action. There is, borrowing from German philosopher Hegel, life is a dialectical process. You have the theory, you have human action, and then you have history, what actually unfolds. So, and this is how the world works: theory, human action, history. That's one way of looking at it. Looking at it as a dialectical process. So, capitalism has evolved. It has evolved. But I think that in terms of the struggle between capitalism and communism or socialism, capitalism is more grounded in a realistic view of human nature than communism or socialism, which gives it advantages. Specifically, what I'm talking about is the naivete involved in the communist socialist concept that, quote, people are good. People are not good. The communist socialists predated Freud. They didn't have the benefit of Sigmund Freud. Freud clearly and unequivocally, part of his genius, demonstrated that people are not good. We all have our good and bad side. We all have the capacity for good and bad. We are not good by nature. That simply is not true. Therefore, people have to be given, in general, most people have to be given incentives. They are best, human beings, any psychologist will tell you this, are motivated best when they are motivated internally by self-interest. People like me who could have made a lot of money, but who has chosen not to, and now I'm a sick old lady, I can't work anyway. But someone who didn't sell out, smart as I am, people they mocked me as a student at Columbia. What's wrong? Beverly, patriotism, loyalty to the ruling class, patriotism. I got mine, I'm keeping it. Copeland is crazy. Yada, yada, yada. But moving right along, so most people need personal incentive. In fact, again, it's great that I was able to study politics, philosophy, and economics and business. By the way, they have a major in Britain called PPE, Philosophy, Politics, and Economics. They need to get that major in the United States, and they need as many African Americans with that creative genius studying that as humanly possible. So basically, that's what I have majored in at the university level, PPE. So, uh, so there's a naive view of human nature right away. But moving right along, so we see, in my opinion, and it's the truth, the most successful form of socialism, communism, was that form that allowed for self-motivation, personal incentive. It was not the bureaucratic Soviet-style communism. The standard joke among Soviet workers were, you pretend to pay me, I pretend to work. In other words, if you're not paying me, I ain't working that hard. However, it was very centralized, very bureaucratic, top down. You know, people used to say, oh, they vote, the voting is they vote, so the voter participation rates are so high under communism in Russia and Soviet Union. Yeah, but the system was rigged to perpetuate the ruling class, the political elites. Unlike America, it's not that way, so we just the opposite. We don't have high voter participations because you could really change things if we did. Moving right along. So, the bureaucrat, highly centralized Russian communism did not allow for personal incentives. However, the communist Chinese, which was decentralized, did under Chairman Mao. And I would argue that is why, because of the nature of communism in China, that is why the Confucian work ethic stayed intact in China and has led to China being the economic miracle that it is today. I developed a model for Chinese economic development that would have been a win-win. I published it. I shared it with people like Peter Juveler at Columbia University and other scholars. It was mine, an original idea. I mean, people used to laugh at me when I talked about China. I remember as an undergraduate student, I went to the Chinese mission. Columbia University had a fit. They thought I was going to defect to China. But I was just so impressed. I had been a lifelong admirer of the communist Chinese. I'm not a communist. I never was. I didn't want to defect. But I knew, I had read about the decentralized Chinese communism, and to me it was, if there were a Thomas More's utopia, it was that kind of decentralized, I'm not a communist, socialism, I would say. So I knew, and I kept saying, China, if they would develop China, it could be a win-win. It could create China could be an indefinite engine of economic growth for Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism, providing great white-collar and blue-collar jobs in the West, and leading to real sustained growth and economic development in China. I developed a paradigm to do that. I published it. I shared it with scholars like Peter Juveler at Columbia University. China was developed, and when people saw that it was developed, they began to understand that I was right. Yet, as it was developed, I could see that it was being developed not according to my plan, but China was being developed to cannibalize the global economy. And I complained to Peter Juveler. I wrote in my newspaper column, this is a perversion of perverted development for China. The Chinese didn't want to do this. They were forced to do this, by the way, because China's development could have been a win-win. Real sustained economic growth, an indefinite engine of economic growth, great white collar. We wouldn't have the economic crisis today if my Chinese model for economic development had been followed, instead of being sabotaged, as clearly, unequivocally, it was sabotaged. So this is why I know this has been a planned and systematic process to destroy the old world order and to replace it with a Polish-led Yugoslav, neo-Nazi, neo-fascist New World Order. Instances like this. So I complained to Juva ad nauseum. Fast forward, today we see it's true. Because of the way China was developed, it has been developed to cannibalize the global economy, not be an indefinite engine of economic growth for Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism. So, yes, so that is true. So, yeah, so let me say, so I was saying now philosophically, so yes, people need incentives, right? We need incentives because we're not purely good. Very few people, most people need incentives to do things, whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing. Society, civilization is like animal or wild animal. We're like animals, let's be honest. Animals, you take them out a while, you put them in a cage, right? Humans, as I've alluded to on other shows, this is tying in from all these philosophical theories, philosophy majors studied. Humans, on the other hand, our cage is civilization. If we were in the wild, we could do whatever we want. But we give up our right to do whatever we want when we enter civil society, and we have to follow the laws and the mores of that society. Civilization then becomes our cage. So it was naive for the socialists and the communists to suggest that people are good. We are not good. You can't tell a child that, because if you do, you're going to make the child cynical. You can't tell a child. But you have to create an environment where the child can learn that on his own without getting hurt. So, so they were naive. Now, capitalism has flaws, but again, the flaws reflect human failing. By the way, people think that capitalism has to be predatory. Just the opposite. When capitalism is predatory, it self-destructs. It cannibalizes an economy. If it's predatory, it cannibalizes and destroys an economy, right? But capitalism demands the opposite. For an economy in order for capitalism to work, an economy has to grow, it has to expand. When an economy is cannibalized or contracts or is destroyed, we have recession. If it's real bad, we have depression. But by definition, GDP has to grow in order for a capitalist economy to be working properly and for there to be health. There has to be markets to sell goods and services to in order for capitalism to work, to be self-sustained. Another byproduct of capitalism, right, has been the development that we see. Because the capitalists are engaged in a competition and they're always looking for a better mousetrap. The new and improved, always see new and improved, because their producers are in a fierce competition to produce a better and better product for the consumer. They're not trying to sell people junk, because capitalists know people are smart enough. If you sell them junk, they made you fool them once, but then they're not going to buy it again, and they're going to tell their friends not to buy it, and you're going to lose market share. They're always trying to sell the best at the best price that they can. The only kind of economy, in a competitive economy, in a monopolistic economy, you could have that happen because there's one producer. That's why monopolies are supposed to be regulated to prevent that kind of abuse. So this is precisely why Africa's, for example, development has stalled with really the with the Western slave trade, because it cannibalized, it was predatory, and Africa was never really allowed to enter the modern capitalist phase where it could produce industry and then post-industry and this compete with more new and improved products. It has remained stagnant despite Africa's vast wealth. That can be attributed to Europeans, but hey, a lot of it at this point can be contributed to Africans themselves. Let's keep it real. So capitalism also, so predatory capitalism is not good by definition. Capitalism they need to find new and improved products. So that leads to innovation, whether it's new medicines, automobiles, whatever. All these new technologies, when the global economy moved from feudalism to farming to capitalism, that's why the global economy has taken off. And unfortunately, Africa never really participated in that because of the predatory relationship the West has had with Africa. Part of it has been the West part of it's been Africa's part. So capitalism is a theory, you know, and let me say this. Okay, so let me just see if I can I just wrote this email. For example, people complain about the Walmarts and the moving in and yada, yada, yada. However, ladies and gentlemen, I wrote in this email, I was writing about one thing, I wrote about this. And I had written about this years ago when I was writing a newspaper column about farming. If now India has relaxed its regulations so the Walmarts can penetrate the Indian market. The way to make that work, and the Indian grocers and wholesalers are very, very nervous, but it could be a win-win, as I discussed in my email. And the way that it could be a win-win, the human crisis is a crisis of ideas, by the Indian grocers and wholesalers forming cooperatives, right, to joint venture with the Walmarts, the Pathmarts, the Kmarts, whatever, so that they can serve the Indian market and have an incentive to provide infrastructure, roads, sewers, schools, bridges, dams, hospitals, etc. for the Indian people. In other words, development, right? Because that could be done. The one thing that would the most serious threat to that work is one word. It's a scourge of, and that is corruption. Because Walmart, for example, has offered, has said, told the Indian government, if you allow us to serve that market, we are going to provide infrastructure, roads, schools, hospitals, etc. So yes, even in America, all this Walmart, if the small stores in the community would form cooperatives, right? And then they could be competitive enough to joint venture with the Walmarts, and through wholesaling, etc., it would be a win-win. And this is not, strictly speaking, a new idea, because I remember around the time that the large pharmacy chains were penetrating the market in New York, I knew, my family knew several blacks who owned pharmacies. Now those pharmacists and they were given the opportunity at this time because these big chains were moving in, they were given the opportunity to become wholesale pharmacists. Those who did went from being upscale to very rich, multimillionaires. It was a win-win. We have the convenience here. I have a Rite Aid. I shop at Pathmart for brilliant concept. And to fill in between, I can have the convenience of a Rite Aid. But it didn't really kill the little pharmacies, because those pharmacies, little mom and pop guys who were upscale, who joined these wholesale pharmacy syndicates, they've done so much better. The same model could be used in India with the Walmarts and the Pathmarts and the Kmarts. And to me, it is very sad, as a proud and unabashed supporter of capitalism, to see how great, I marvel when I use my Dell XPS computer and my Windows software. What creative genius, Dell and Gates are. It takes leadership, and it takes really to have done what they have done. Or I marvel, let's say, when I go to Kmart. The buyers at Kmart they are really unbelievably good. And Pathmark that concept. So, and on and on and on. So, and it doesn't have to be, people always assume it's a big business, the corporate, they're predatory. No, it doesn't have to be that way. And by the way, these socialist, communist economies, especially the large bureaucratic ones, reduce to, given human nature, people not being naturally good but having a bad and good side, they reduce to state capitalism, theoretically. Not really communism or socialism, state bureaucratic, highly controlled state capitalism. The owners of the means of production, quote unquote, are the state. De facto, they became the communist leadership. So, capitalism is just a theory, it is ideas. Predatory capitalism, by definition, is anti-capitalist. I could go on, but I've run out of time. I really wanted to continue on capitalism, why I support it. I'm fully aware of the downside potential, but again, that reflects human failings, not failings inherent necessarily with a theory that that evolves. A good theory is only a theory that evolves in response to the dialectical process, the application of the theory, human action. It evolves in response to make it new and make a newer and an improved version of the theory. I believe in social evolution. I am philosophically driven by a sense of moral order and justice. I'm Beverly Copeland. This has been the Beverly Copeland Report. Pray that I get to London by March. You guys will be able to see my show on Facebook, YouTube, maybe even, if I get a sponsor, continue to Bronx and Manhattan. I'm Beverly Copeland. This has been Bronx and Manhattan Neighborhood Network. This has been the Beverly Copeland